you actually still have to sell money.
Not everything is the right opportunity for you at that moment.
I kind of saw opportunity in everything.
Someone is more likely to trust you if you've given them free information that isn't involved in you selling them an offer.
If you were a bad lawyer before AI, you're still going to be a bad lawyer. Putting themselves in the other person's shoes every single time, because that is the route to success.
Welcome to the podcast From Cull to Close. My name is Saeed and I'm the founder here at SRC Growth Partner, a growth company that helps professional services firms from around the world increase their revenue and profitability by acquiring new clients. My guest today is Susan Dunn from Harbour, an internationally recognized litigation and arbitration firm. Susan is one of the most experienced and well-known professionals internationally in the litigation funding sector. A pioneer of litigation funding, Susan has been sourcing and investing for over 23 years, and during this time has provided significant input to the development of public policy in numerous jurisdictions. With over 3 decades of experience building relationships and developing opportunities, she's passionate about helping other professionals expedite their own growth journeys. Susan, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much for having me. Lovely to see you.
Yeah, great to have you on here. And I'm really looking forward to the conversation, primarily because I feel like we've had a discussion previously, and I feel like your journey from where you started to where you are now has a lot of lessons that can be translated into many different areas of professional services and in anyone's individual career. So I think it's really interesting. But for the viewers and listeners out there that don't necessarily know who Susan Dunn is, can you share a little bit more of your background and introduce yourself to everyone?
Sure. So I started off in a very conventional way, and then life kind of took over, and I found myself in doing things that I never would have contemplated, not least because when I qualified as a lawyer, litigation funding didn't exist. So it wasn't even a possibility of being a litigation funder back when I was at university, and then I qualified in 1992. And so I had in mind that I was going to have a fairly traditional career. I was a commercial litigator, that I would, progress through the usual career progression of a litigator. I had a brilliant training at a firm that was then called Rag & Co, now called Gowling. And during that time, I sort of recognized a couple of things, one of which was I seemed to have a knack at a very young age for business development, for getting new clients. And that was something that was highly valued, is still highly valued. And also during this time, the firm operated an exchange scheme with a firm in Atlanta, and I managed to get on that. And going to Atlanta made me realize, actually there's a world outside of where I am. So I ended up moving to live in Atlanta. And whilst I was there, I worked both as a diplomat, and in that capacity, I was selling my country. So I was covering the 7 southeastern states, helping businesses there to set up in the UK, hopefully beating European competition. Then I came back and I did some .com work, which was far too early, and like most .coms failed. But again, that was selling .com services actually for government services at the time, until sort of by accident in 2002 I became a litigation funder, and since 2002 have been working in funding, working with dozens and dozens and dozens of law firms all over the world. And my job, which I thought, gosh, I'll be popular, I've got money to hand out, you actually still have to sell money. So you have to, it's all about the relationships. And I think that's the theme that runs through all of this, is everything has been relationship driven in everything I do. And what makes those relationships work is building the rapport, building the trust, and having constant curiosity. And I think for me, and one of the things you and I talked about before this, is that I kind of saw opportunity in everything. And over the years, I've had to just almost manage my own opportunity obsession so that I spend my time wisely. And I think that's one of the lessons learned over the years of the various things that I've done, about how you capitalize on opportunity and capitalize on the relationships you have so that they're working for you even when you're not in the room.
I love what you just said there, and I think it's really interesting. Essentially, mentioned something that's very topical right now in most spheres, and it's that shiny object syndrome amongst entrepreneurs, right? And it's so common where it's like, oh, you can see opportunity in everywhere, but not everything is the right opportunity for you at that moment. And so, understanding what works for you, what's great for you, and then also having the skill to understand where the opportunities lie, that is the highest leverage opportunity for you is a skill in itself. So I think it's really interesting you said there. For all those out there who might be wondering what a litigation funder is or what you do, can you elaborate on what exactly you do in selling money?
It's a very simple proposition, which unfortunately seems to get overcomplicated in people's minds. So I have spent the past 23 years trying to myth bust and explain what it is, but it's very straightforward, and it's this. So we look after other people's money, mostly educational endowment and pension fund money, and we invest that money in cases which are presented to us where the claimant either can't afford the fees or doesn't want to pay for the costs of running the case. And we're talking multi-million pound budgets for these cases. So these are very large, very significant cases. And what we do is we then, if we like a case, we will fund all the costs of the case throughout its life. And we will, in return, be paid a share of the proceeds if the case is successful. If it is not successful, or there's no money recovered, then we don't get paid anything. So it's quite a high risk game to be in. And obviously, therefore, the kind of risk assessment of the cases that you're choosing to fund is critical. And you're constantly learning things, as we have done over the years, about what makes a good claim for funding. Now, although we're all lawyers, we don't run the cases. We leave the client and their lawyer to run the case together as they would ordinarily, and then we're the ones paying the bills. Obviously got an interest in what's going on, but leaving that relationship exactly as it would be if the clients were paying the bills. And it started in the world of insolvency where there was no money, and now it is used by every single type of business you can possibly think of. High street names use this, everybody uses this, because it's like laying off that risk of losing to somebody else in and being okay in return to say, well, I'm going to give away a share of the proceeds, but I know I'm paying nothing if this case is unsuccessful. So that's the attraction for people.
It makes a lot of sense. And it's actually, I guess it's a world where many might not even know exists. And it's relatively new and in its infancy from the sounds of things in your journey and accidentally coming into litigation funding. So I think it's really interesting to dig deep into it. But I want to touch on a kind of terminology you used in the sense that you said selling money, right? As an investment manager, it might sound counterintuitive. What do you mean sell money? So can you maybe elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So in the beginning, there was just me. So I started it in this jurisdiction. And then over time, there have been new entrants into the market. And so that means that people have choices about who they go with, what those terms are, and what that means. And so as a result, we come back to the same things that got us there in the first place, because, of course, the financial terms of what you're charging are important. But when you're working with law firms, because these cases can last years, so you need to know that you've got a good relationship with a funder you can trust, who you know has ring-fenced the money, who you know is not going to panic when things get difficult, because they always do in litigation. And therefore, you are going to be a good partner. In the same way as we look at the funded party and the law firm needs to be a good partner for us. So it may be that we look at a case and go, well, technically, that's a great case, but that funded party is going to be a real pain to be with for a number of years. And I don't think we can rely on them to behave sensibly, because, all rests in their hands. So it's a two-way street of assessing obviously the price of what you're charging, but as important is what's the nature of this relationship going to look like through thick and thin of this case.
It makes a lot of sense as well, primarily because you're a team of lawyers, but you're not necessarily doing the litigation or the case. And so I guess having that expertise and knowing, okay, you can make the assessment, is this a good partner to work with? Is it not? Is this case a winnable case? I guess you have that expertise to be able to go, okay, well, we know the domain we're working in, and we also have we're the bridge between financiers as well. So I think that's also an interesting part. It's also very interesting you mentioned, especially at the start of the conversation, in your knack for business development, right? And the fact that you felt that you always had a knack for business development. And we always, with our clients and our partners, anyone we work with, we always say that there are two things that you need to have for any deal to occur, right? And that is trust and relationships, right? And so leaning into the relationship element of it, you emphasize that relationship building principles are surprisingly universal across professional services, and I couldn't agree more with you there. What are the core 2 to 3 relationship principles that would work regardless of industry, wherever you are?
So number one is always curiosity. You've got to have constant curiosity. And why did I get clients at such a young age? It was just because I was curious. And so I'd be on the phone to a client talking about the existing case that we were running. And then when we would have a conversation, periodically, I would just, and this was the phrase I used, and it always generated a further conversation and often further work, is I would just say, and how are things otherwise? Now, that might lead to a conversation about something personal. It often led to conversations about something that was going on in the business. And I think, so you've got that curiosity, and that's generated, you've given a nice open question to give people the opportunity to talk. But what too many people are then doing is going straight into sales mode. They are not thinking, what is it that this person needs to solve that particular issue that they've got? And if you kind of go into hard sell, that's a huge turnoff for people. So you're teasing information out of them. You're talking about solutions that might be possible for them. And to be clear, sometimes what I would recommend to somebody was not using us, was, that I had an alternative solution that was better on that occasion for whatever the reasons might be. That's the trust building bit, that they don't feel like, oh my God, every time I talk to her, it's a hard sell to sell that thing she's got. It's that actually you're being helpful about a particular issue, which doesn't necessarily include you. And that's an incredibly valuable lesson to learn. And I'm also just a big fan of introducing people to each other who can be helpful outside of what I'm doing for them. Because again, that people feel a sort of sense of warmth that you have thought about the issues they're facing, as opposed to just projecting onto them. So it's the listening skills, it's the not doing the hard sell, it's the teasing information out of people, and that's where the trust gets built.
This is music to my ears, Susan. I've got to say, we often, especially with our partners, we talk about a specific type of selling approach, which isn't exactly selling. We call it consultative selling, right? It kind of leans into exactly what you said there. It's about being curious about what the problem actually is, understanding where they're coming from, and then turning around and going, okay, how can you solve that problem? And it doesn't necessarily mean that you will be the one solving that problem, but just understanding what the problem is and having the network, the know-how to go, okay, no, this is how you would attack this problem, often leads to that second element, which we talked about when we went into the relationships element. It's that trust building, right? Someone is more likely to trust you if you've given them free information that isn't involved in you selling them an offer or anything like that. And so that builds up that reputation and the business development element of it. So I think it's really interesting you mentioned that. So in your experience working with professional services and people in your team and things like that, what's the biggest mistake you see professionals make when they're trying to build those crucial relationships? And I know you'd said selling too quickly, but is there anything else that you think people should be veering away from?
Oh my God, the danger is, it's like you haven't got enough hours for me to tell you the things. But let me think about, it comes back to this curiosity. There's nothing more attractive than somebody simply showing off. That's really very unappealing. So, no need to do that. But if you're curious about somebody and what they're doing. And then you're able to say, oh, funnily enough, I've been working on a case that's like that. And so you're finding those touch points that are making you feel similar, making that person think, oh gosh, they really understand me. They've really heard what I'm saying, that as opposed to them just projecting any old thing in the hope that you'll go, oh, okay, yeah, thanks for that. It's about matching up the things that you're hearing with the things that you go, oh, that I've got a little nugget over here that I can match up so that I can show I've been listening to them. So I think that's absolutely crucial. And what I would say is, just in addition, and I find this staggering considering I'm talking about lawyers who, should be good at these things. I am staggered at the poor quality of presentation of information that we receive on a very, very regular basis. And of course, what that does is you look at it and go, well, if you can't even present it to me now at this stage, which should be the honeymoon phase, well, what confidence do I have about how you're going to present this case to the other side? Because you haven't won me over and you're very unclear, incoherent, you're not thinking about the points, you're not doing it in a sort of efficient, concise way. So the efficiency of communication is absolutely critical. And funnily enough, the lawyers who are best at this are Australian lawyers. I don't know why that is, but there's something about the way they're trained, that they present things beautifully, as opposed to, we get people who drop you an email and say, I've got a case, here's the link to my data room, go and have a look and see what you think. And you're like, it's already a no. You have not tried to lure me in with a short summary saying, I've got a case, this is where it is, this is who it's against, this is what it's worth and why, and this is how much funding I'm looking for. Is that something of interest? And then you've got the hook going, right? So it's like I'm constantly staggered by people, again, and what that's about is they haven't put themselves in my shoes to think, well, it'd be like sending your mortgage lender just a photo of your house and saying, can I have a mortgage, please? With nothing else to go with it, right? It's not thinking about what the other person's needs are in the way that you communicate, both in person and in writing. So, and it's more true now than it's ever been. We live in a world where people are scrolling. Attention deficit is massive. They've only got very short attention spans. So make sure you get people on the hooks quickly and soon so that you're able to kind of reel them in. It's really important.
I couldn't agree with you more. And it makes me think of, we talk internally about a simple term, simple phrase when pitching or when you're speaking to someone. It's what's in it for them, right? It's as simple as that. It's like,
it really is.
Why should they care? What is in it for them? And if you lead with that and actually go, okay, what would they want? And then work backwards from that, you give yourself a good chance to actually start a conversation or go in whichever direction you want to go in. So you've been in the industry for many, many years now, highly experienced and very successful. Looking back at your career progression and things like that, what one skill do you wish you'd developed earlier? Which one skill did you wish you would have honed and gone, okay, this is the most important thing for me?
Gosh, I mean, look, I think my innate curiosity was always there. And it's like I say to my team when they come back from meeting with somebody or talking about a case. And I think, one of the things that I say to them is they're focusing, as lawyers do, and quite rightly, on the kind of the case itself. And then I'll start asking them things like, is the defendant married? Or who is it that we think what's the motivations? What do you think are the motivations between these parties beyond the facts of the case? And I think it's really important to kind of not just look at what's right in front of you, but looking for those softer signs around the edges and making sure you don't miss those, because people are telling you so much more information in little hints that are there. They're obvious. They're there and available for you. But I'm staggered how rarely they get picked up on in meetings. And you're sort of sitting there going, oh my God, this is so obvious what's going on here, what the motivations are. And I think that is something which is really important to have from a very early age. And I think then the other thing again, you and I touched on this whole thing about opportunity. I feel like I did the right thing by sort of saying yes to everything in my early career. But then I did have to be guided by a particularly good marketing person we worked with who had to say to me eventually, Susan, there isn't an opportunity in everything. And time is your most valuable resource. So just think carefully. Every time somebody says, can I have a coffee? Do you want to do whatever? You have to put people in categories and have to be quite hard-nosed. I suppose I found it a little bit hard because I was thinking I don't want to make life all transactional, but let's get real, right? And so it was thinking about realistically, if I spend my time with this person, are they ever going to send me a case? If the answer is realistically, you've learned over the years that certain types of professional never do, then find polite ways to say no. And what you've got to focus on is the people who you know are going to send you cases. And then the most important people are the people you are working with cases on and who you know talk positively about you even when you're not in the room, because you'll get referrals because they'll say, I was talking to Bob and he said I should contact you. Nothing makes me happier than one of those emails, because it's like I've got this kind of sales force that's out working and I'm not even paying them anything to do my job for me. So that's where you focus your efforts, right? But in the early days of your career, I do actually think it's really important to really do say yes, because it's a learning thing of people who you know you don't want to talk to again, as well as those you do want to talk to. But as time passes, you do have to get more strict about how you're going to spend your time.
I think you're spot on there. And especially the way I look at it is, and I've had to experience that as I grow the business, my own business, and more, it's the allocation of resource of your own time, right? Because when you're running a business, you allocate the resource that you have. You've got employees, you've got things that need to get done, and you're meticulous about that. You're regimented about that. But often what happens is when we think about our own time, it's very easy to go, oh, we'll just say yes to everything, and we're less meticulous about that. And that can, at one, burn us out. And two, not every single opportunity is the right type of opportunity, as you mentioned.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
I think it's really important. I want to talk about a two-letter word that seems to be taking the word by storm over the last few years, and it begins with A and ends in I. It's something that a lot of people like to talk about, and I always want to touch on it in terms of understanding people's opinion in their own industry on how AI it will affect them and also their industry alone. So maybe you could share some insights on what you're seeing at the moment with regards to AI and how it's affecting.
Yeah. So, the whole sort of legal tech and now, I guess, AI side of things is something which I'm really super interested in. Although I kind of always caveat this by saying basic human intelligence still has quite a long way to go. When I look back at that whole thing about, just about how you present a case, just think about it, common sense and how to do things. So can we please not forget how important those side of things are? In the legal profession, and I think there's a lot of twitchiness in various directions about this. And, the way I look at it is, I look at the beginning of my career when you could spend hours proofreading a document or putting tabs in folders of a thing or whatever. And everybody's like, oh, it's going to lose all the jobs for the junior lawyers. I'm like, I learned nothing from doing those kind of jobs, which technology absolutely should be doing. It wasn't interesting. It wasn't teaching me anything. So the more we can hand over what I call the admin of law to technology, let's do it. We didn't become lawyers to do admin. We did it because we're interested in the legal strategy, application to a case, getting into the facts, figuring out how the tactics might be. And so, there's a leading judge here, and during London Disputes Week this year, because everybody's like, and they have always cite the cases where there was like, oh, there was this made up pleading which had made up cases in it, and it was all because of AI, and it's all going to be terrible. And Jeffrey Voss, who's a very senior judge here, he said, look, if you were a bad lawyer before AI, you're still going to be a bad lawyer. But if you're a good lawyer, AI is only going to make you better because it's going to make you more efficient, but you've still got to apply the rigor and the review of the information that you're providing, because that's where you're bringing your skill and that's what you're charging for. But getting rid of all of those dreary tasks, that's not a bad thing. It's not good for any human to spend years working on just the documents aspect of a case. They don't learn anything, they don't develop. So I'm a huge fan of all that it can do. And look, I love things like ChatGPT and that sort of thing because they are really valuable for brainstorming and for all sorts of things. And being used for very standard documents, because guess what? There was a ton of us as young trainees who weren't very good and no doubt made several mistakes in the documents that we didn't really know what we were doing. So why don't you standardize this? Why don't you remove the human element of the cock-up that can happen because somebody wasn't paying attention? So I think it only makes the job more interesting. And as long as we keep the focus on, and if anything, you're then able to engage the young lawyers more as an integrated part of the case from early on, because they're not off doing some photocopying, then they should actually learn more quickly and be more valuable more quickly as a result. So I don't worry about it. I think it's to be embraced as long as you continue to apply your rigor to what the end product.
I think you hit the nail on the head there. It's always about the expert behind the computer, right? So whether that you've read a resource or you've typed it into ChatGPT and that cited you certain things, you still need to do your checks. You still need to apply everything you know as an expert in the subject matter or a subject matter expert to be able to then go, okay, well, how will I utilize this information for my benefit or for my client's benefit, as well as also mitigating and getting rid of all the mundane tasks. Once upon a time, couriers used to send over tax returns to HMRC. Now, a click of a button, you can submit it online.
Precisely.
Is that a bad thing? No, it's a good thing. Once upon a time, accountants used to do ledgers by hand. Now, thanks to Excel, people can do it very easily on their computer. Is that a bad thing? No, it's not. It's technology as it's involved. But you still need the skill behind the guy writing the ledgers and things like that to be able to do it. Yeah.
I can't program an Excel spreadsheet.
Yeah.
Put an Excel spreadsheet in front of me and I will be able to tell you where the mistake is.
Exactly.
Because I'm bringing to bear what I think the answers should look like, and I can therefore spot where it's gone wrong. And then I go to them and go, oh yeah, I got that formula wrong. I'm like, yeah, I knew it doesn't read right. So I'm bringing that skill, but you would never ask me to put the formulas into an Excel spreadsheet. That's not who I am, right?
Yeah, absolutely love that. Well, in this section of the podcast, Susan, we like to call the Entrepreneur's Room. And that's a series of questions we like to ask all of our guests to give our viewers and listeners an opportunity to understand how business owners and business leaders think and operate when running their business. So at this stage of the podcast, I always like to open with the same question, which is, how are you currently spending your days as the leader of the business?
So my role over the years, because, look, when you start a business, you're doing everything, including changing the toilet rolls. It's that basic. You do everything, but you learn tons, right, as you're doing everything. And then over time, so it's like you raise the money, you're finding the office space, you're doing all the things, you're hiring the people, you're reviewing the cases, you're managing the cases, and, all of those things. And then as time goes on, you kind of develop your team, you get people in the team who have strengths in the particular areas, but the marketing need never goes away. And so as time has gone on, I now chair the Association of Litigation Funders, but my role ends up becoming much more external, as well as then, when it's valuable, because I've just been here forever, being able to support people who haven't been here forever to be able to say, actually, it could be helpful if blah, 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 that you're doing this. So I have a much more external facing role. I have that kind of regulatory role, and there's some lobbying I'm doing for some legislation at the moment. So you end up in those kind of more almost like policy things, but definitely on the external presentation side of things. That's where I can, I have the skills and I'm best used. And I sit on the investment committee. And so it's those sorts of things that you end up doing, because you're then bringing to bear the experience that you've developed over time.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. It's more of a strategic position, right? And being the face of the brand and being forward facing to the market. So that's always interesting to hear the roles of founders and how they developed over time.
Yeah.
What are the most important metrics for you when running the business?
Well, that's quite easy because it's like, you want to have, but people like to say, what's your success rate? And it's not actually, it's a two-part question. Because when you're a litigation funder, of course you want cases that are going to win or settle. But actually the bigger question is, how much did I make when that case won or settled? Because you could win 100% of your cases, but if you only ever made £1 more than you spent, you wouldn't be in business anymore. So you could actually have a lower success rate, but if your margins are high, that the returns on what you invested are high on those ones that you successfully selected, then you actually can look more successful than the person who appears to be able to pick the winners, but is only picking the winners, but not the ones with the big margin. So what we're looking for is ideally a combination that you are good at selecting cases which have the maximum possible marginal return. And the thing that has impacted us more over time is the duration of cases has got longer. So you're really focusing in a lot on how long is this case going to take to conclude, because that has a sort of negative impact on my return profile.
Makes a lot of sense. It's a sensible way to look at it. It's the margin that you bring in rather. It's a simple business but
Yeah,
obviously with your model, that's what you really need to be looking at.
exactly.
Yeah, which is
Exactly. Yeah.
that's really interesting to hear.
Yeah.
So, in terms of then, I'm sure you've been in business for many years now and growing the business. What is it that you currently, and you touched on being front facing, forward facing to the market. What are the business development activities are you doing to grow the business?
Yeah, so that's a whole range of things, from, I've been on LinkedIn for a long time, and for a long time people poo-pooed LinkedIn and said, oh, I don't know, it's very much. And I have found that to be an increasingly valuable tool, because you've got this ability to get messages out to a lot of people all at once really efficiently. So I am actually a fan of LinkedIn, and you get some weird and wonderful contacts that come through on that. But there's been cases that have come to us through LinkedIn, and you think, how weird that they know which company I'm from. They didn't go to that website, they went to LinkedIn instead. So that's, it's a lesson learned, right? We do a lot, and I do a lot still, of presenting at conferences where, you're looking obviously at what your target audience is. So that's a good example of being selective. So, much as it might be lovely to go and attend a conference in Prague, if the target audience is people who are doing a type of case you don't do, then don't waste your time, right? So I think sometimes you can be a bit flattered into, oh, I must be fabulous. And think always about, does this room contain my target audience? And I try only to go to conferences where I am speaking, because just being an attendee, you're going to get much less reach than if you are a good speaker. So it really does you good to be able to develop a good speaking style so that you get invited to be a speaker, because it kind of, once you get into that loop, people then say, oh, you should go and talk to her because I saw her speak and she has got a combination of explaining things. She's a bit provocative sometimes, which is quite fun. You're kind of trying to make yourself stand out from somebody who's just doing a dreary monotone, here's my PowerPoint presentation and what I'm going to do. Trying to keep it lively, trying to use some humor, all of those sorts of things, and podcasts and all of those sorts of things, and getting involved in networks. So a lot of networking events, going to networks where, it's like I'm on a pro bono panel at the moment to better improve the provision of pro bono provision. And that's led me to meet a whole range of different people who are doing pro bono as part of their role, but, actually are people I would like to talk to about what we're doing. So it's trying to get yourself involved in groups which are going to always build your network, because your network will be your friend as you go through life. And I can't emphasize enough how important, from as early an age as possible, it is to get yourselves into networks, to get yourselves going along to these events. And one of my tips about going to networking events, because they can be really hard work, is a couple of things. First is, ideally, if you can find somebody to go with you, do that. They don't even have to be from your organization, but you know them from another business. Go together, because you'll feel braver going into a room on your own. And I also have a rule for myself, which is, if after 10 minutes at something, I'm miserable, I've not been able to find anybody to talk to, I can't strike up a conversation with anybody, I'm allowed to go home. And just knowing that I've got that get out of jail free card, it's amazing how rarely I end up using it. But rather than me thinking, oh my God, I'm a rubbish conversationalist, I've got nothing to say, it's like, don't beat yourself up. Tonight is just not the night for this event. So leave it, go home, and tomorrow's another day. And then you might find somebody different to talk to and things will change. You don't want to make these things in your head become always associated with being a negative, sad event to go to. You want it to be an enjoyable thing.
It's so interesting you said that. With networking events, I absolutely love them, but I'm exactly the same. I also give myself the opportunity to go, okay, this might not be the one for me, and that's fine. If I leave early, that's absolutely fine. And you'll find that certain networking events are much more your kind of space, where you've got lots of people that you're flowing with. And it reminds me of like an athlete. They're not perfect every single day, and some days they go in.
Exactly.
But
don't beat yourself up.
Exactly.
Right? It's okay.
Yeah.
We all have off days as well. And other people will be having off days. But you're right. And the loveliest thing when you go into, there's one event I can think of that I go to quite regularly. And it's one of those things that you kind of go, oh hi, and then it's like, oh hi, and then you get in it and it all flows and you come away kind of buoyed by the energy that's being created by those types of interactions.
Absolutely, absolutely. Couldn't agree with you more, Susan. Susan, it's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you today. I like to end every single podcast with the same question, right? Okay. And it is, if you had a magic wand you could wave to solve one business problem, what would that be?
Gosh, I think it's just people always thinking about what they're communicating and putting themselves in the other person's shoes every single time, because that is the route to success. If you do that, you'll get a good reputation for being thoughtful. So I think it is, I can't emphasize enough, curiosity, and always put yourself in the other person's shoes. And that includes, I've had some tricky people I've dealt with in my life. That includes, that almost certainly isn't about you. And don't forget that people bring into the room all of their stuff, right? So pay attention and really look at it and go, gosh, I wonder if this person's got any sort of stresses or strains that they're dealing with today, which is making them different to deal with, or just being very observant of who is the person I've got in the room with me today, and let me deal with that person and make no assumptions about how I should behave. And then, make sure you adapt accordingly, depending on who you've got in the room.
Amazing. Well, Susan, it's been an absolute pleasure having you. It's been a fantastic
thank you for having me.
For all those out there that want to know how to reach out to you, where can they go? How would they find you?
Well, if you go to the Harbour Litigation Funding website, I'm on there. And then also I am very much on LinkedIn. So Susan Dunn, Harbour Litigation Funding on LinkedIn, where you will be able to send me a message if you would like to. And I'd love to hear from anyone who's interested.
Perfect. Well, again, Susan, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much for sharing your insights today.
Thank you for having me.